everyone, my name is David MacPhail. I'm an author and I am absolutely delighted to be part of the Scottish Silly Squad supporting Scottish libraries and the Summer Reading Challenge this summer 2020. Okay, so I thought I would start off by talking to you a little bit about some of my books. In particular, this book here is part of this series, Top-Secret Grandad Me, just behind me. Top-Secret Grandad Me, Death by Soup, which is one of the books that on this year's Silly Squad reading list for the Summer Reading Challenge. Now this book series is it's about a boy who solves mysteries with the help of his ghostly granddad. That's his ghostly granddad there, by the way. So that's what it's about. His name's Jay Patel, and the reason he becomes a detective is that about 9 months before this book, this is the first book in the series, Death by Tumble Dryer, about 9 months before this book begins, his father disappeared off the face of the earth. Very mysteriously. His father was this stage magician, and he was called the Great Maharishi. And basically his father he used to go up on stage and do his act, a magician's act, and he was on stage in Glasgow and on the King's Theatre, on the stage, doing his act, and it was called the Great Vanishing Act. It's a very famous act that magicians do. And what happens is, or what's supposed to happen, is that the magician, Jay's father, by the way, is called the Great Maharishi. He has this gigantic turban with a jewel in the middle and a huge cape and everything. The magician is on stage like the Great Maharishi, and his act is very, very specific. A box is brought onto the stage, and the box is quite tall. It looks like a coffin on wheels, very tall coffin. And what happens is that he opens the box, and the Great Maharishi gives a swipe of his cloak, and he jumps inside like that. And his assistant closes the box, and then what happens is she does this with like a hula hoop. She goes like that over the top, just so that you know that there's no way around the back. And she does this underneath with her hand, so that you know that there's no way that he can get underneath. There's no false bottom or anything like that. And then she spins it around like this and gives it a tap, and then she opens the box, and the Great Maharishi is gone. He's disappeared. And the crowd goes absolutely wild. Yay! That's fantastic. How did you do it? It's amazing. And just as their applause is dying down, and the assistant's standing like this, just as the applause is starting to die down, what happens is a light goes up in the corner of the stage, and the Great Maharishi comes dancing on like this. Ha ha! Yes, and the crowd goes absolutely ecstatic. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. How could it possibly have happened? How could he have done that? He moved from the box to the stage. It's amazing. And that's what's supposed to happen with the Great Vanishing Act. However, on this one occasion, in 9 months before this book here starts, what happened was somewhat different. And it started really well. It started off good. What happened was that he did his act on stage. The box came out. He jumped into the box. The box lid was closed. His assistant did this with a hula hoop, this with her hand, twirled it round, gave a knock, opened the door. He was gone. Crowd applauded. Woo! And then the spotlight went up in the corner of the stage, just as the applause started to die, and the assistant was standing like this, and nothing happened. Nothing. He didn't come back. The applause died off. The assistant was like this. Come on, where are you? Where are you? No, nothing. He'd gone. He'd vanished off the face of the earth and was never seen again. So that's what happens. That's what happens to Jay's father in these books. And so from that day, Jay decided to become a detective so that he could find his father again. And then, of course, his grandfather turns up in this book. So that's what happens here. And so they become a double act, solving mysteries together. This book here, as I say, it's in the Silly Squad Summer Reading Challenge list this year. It's called Death by Soup. And in this book, Jay and his grandfather and his mum and his granny head off to this fancy hotel in the Scottish countryside, near Loch Lomond in fact. And that's where the mystery actually takes place. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this story to you. I'll read chapter 1 anyway. I'll read chapter 1. And chapter 1's called The Soggy Beginning, okay? It was raining in Glasgow, which shouldn't come as a surprise. It's a bit like saying it's sunny in Mallorca. It's always sunny in Mallorca. Or saying the air on Mars is a bit thin. Yeah, obvs. This is Glasgow. It rains. A lot. But this wasn't your normal rain. You know, the kind that gently pitter-patters on your roof and drips off umbrellas. This was a full-blown monsoon, battering against the window of our flat in a wild, soggy torrent. Usually, I'm the one caught out in weather like that, because that's just my luck. I'm normally that drenched boy you pass in your warm car, soaked to the skin and looking like something a drowned rat would have a good laugh at. But on this occasion, I was lucky enough to be indoors. In the kitchen, in fact. Sitting at the table, looking out through the rain-blurred window. Something's not right, I said. What do you mean, boy? Asked Grandad in an Indian accent fused with Glaswegian. Or should I say, the ghost of my Grandad who sat beside me. Well, he didn't really sit, having no body to sit with. More floated in a sort of sitting position, which he often did to make himself feel less like what he was, an actual, real-life spectre. Not that it did any good. His face still had a green tinge, the kind you get with a bad case of seasickness, and he was completely see-through. To top it off, he wore a Macintosh raincoat with the collar turned up, a fedora hat, and a pair of sunglasses. He looked ridiculous. Thankfully, nobody else could see him but me. I leant forward and whispered so that Mum couldn't hear. Can't you take your coat and hat off? We're indoors. I am a ghost, Jayesh, he replied. I can do what I want. Sorry, what's not right, dearie? Asked Mum, flouncing around the kitchen. She was cooking supper, though it looked more like she was doing some kind of weird modern dance. She had long flowing hair and wore a long flowing scarf and a long flowing dress, all of which were completely impractical for cooking, or indeed any form of human activity. I stared down at the letter in my hands, which had dropped through our door out of the blue just a few weeks previously. It was from Yummy Cola, the drinks company. Mrs. K. Patel and Master Jay Patel, congratulations! You have won a fabulous weekend break at a luxury country house hotel. We look forward to welcoming you at Brightborough Manor. The thing is, Mum, you said you never entered any competition for Yummy Cola. She scoffed. Why would I do that? Fizzy drinks are bad for your aura, and they make you burp. Well, that figured. My mum never drank anything that wasn't 100% organic. Her idea of a refreshing beverage was a glass of carrot juice. If she wanted to push the boat out, she might squeeze some honey in it. But that was about it. Don't you get it? I said. If you didn't enter the competition, and I didn't enter the competition, how did we win the competition? What? She said, nonplussed. I mean, how did we win a competition that we didn't put in for? Mum blinked and then shook her head and ladled something hot and steaming into a bowl, which I hoped, against all hope, was edible. Jay, there's an age-old saying, never look a gift horse in the mouth. She is right, son, said Grandad. And besides, look at the brochure. He jabbed his finger at the photos of the hotel and the rooms, which looked quite plush. Jacuzzis in every room. So, I whispered, you can't even use a jacuzzi. You did. Do not rub it in, he said, offended. What did you say? Asked Mum. It was always so difficult having two different conversations at once. I was constantly getting mixed up. Frankly, people were beginning to think I was weird. Apart from Mum, of course, who was already a bit weird. There's another saying, I replied. If something looks too good to be true, then it probably is. Ha, huffed Grandad. Kids these days, they do not know they are living. When I was your age, living in India, I would have walked 20 miles for a jacuzzi. Jacuzzis weren't even invented then. I said, but then Mum looked at me quizzically, wondering what I was talking about. I shook my head. Nothing. Look, it's how we won is the question. You think it is some kind of scam? Said Grandad. A scam? I rubbed my chin. I'm not sure, it's just odd, that's all. Grandad was staring intently at the overhead light. His spooky eyeballs were twirling around in their sockets. Watching a fly circling the lampshade. His face flashed with determination. That fly is annoying me. I'm going to ghost whack it. Grandad had ghostly powers. He could touch things, move things about, even kick people. As for his spectral sneezes, they could blow up tiny whirlwinds. Achoo! His special powers had helped me out of more than a few tight spots during our detective work. But lately, he'd been suffering a crisis of confidence, a bit like a striker who could no longer score goals. He didn't believe he could do it. Grandad floated higher until his eyes were level with the bottom of the lampshade. He studied the fly's movements closely for a few seconds before slowly stretching out his arms. Yeah! He slapped his hands shut on the fly. Unfortunately, his hands just went right through each other. The fly didn't feel a thing. It just kept going round and round in circles. Grandad's face fell and he sunk back down to the table like a deflated balloon. I am a rubbish ghost. A scam! Mum snatched up a mallet and whacked the large gong that sat on the table. Boing! A gong, by the way, that was about a foot away from my head. My eardrums quivered. And then she yelled at the top of her voice, "Dinner!" Which at least stopped my eardrums quivering, but made them wobble instead. All this was for Granny's benefit, as she was hard of hearing. Granny, right, was a tiny terrier of a woman. And I mean tiny. She was once offered the part as one of Snow White's dwarfs in the local panto, and she was shorter than some of the children playing the part. Lately, she'd taken up karate. She burst through the door, dressed in a white karate outfit with a bandana wrapped round her head. She half waddled to the table. I blamed both the swagger and the waddle on the bodybuilding supplements she'd been taking. She said she wanted to look like she was in an action movie. I wasn't sure that a movie about karate grannies would be that successful. Ah, there's my girl, said Grandad, grinning at her fondly. Just as beautiful as the day I married her. Granny suddenly snarled. A flash of white sleeve, and she lashed her arm out and karate chopped the fly in midair. Hi-ya! The fly dropped with one pathetic, final buzz. And then it thrashed around helplessly on its back on the kitchen floor. Grandad's grin only got bigger. Ah, what a woman. Well, said Mum, if it's a scam to get money out of his dearie, then they chose the wrong people to mess with. She wasn't wrong there. We didn't have any money to scam. Times were tight, especially since Dad disappeared off the face of the earth 10 months previously. Mum plunked the soup bowls in front of us. Ta-da! She said, as if she'd just done some sort of magic trick. Kale, seaweed and turnip soup. I stared down at the contents of my bowl. My stomach turned. It looked like something you'd find at the bottom of a ditch. Smelt like it too. Yeah, times truly were tight. I glanced at Granny. Her face was as white as her karate outfit. Her eye twitched at Mum. Notice she doesn't eat it, she croaked. Mum gave an airy flick of her hand. I had a big lunch. Grandad chortled. For once, I'm glad I'm dead. Come on, eat up, Mum smiled. We're off to the hotel early tomorrow morning. We're going to make a day of it. Granny caught my eye and nodded towards the pot plant near the kitchen table. See, Jayesh, said Grandad, the things your granny does for you. And he was right, because she was offering me her turn at using the plant pot to dispose of my dinner, which was amazingly generous, given the food that was on offer. I nodded thankfully, and then waited till Mum's back was turned and tipped the contents of the bowl into the pot. The plant gulped it up. A big rubbery thing. Goodness knows how it survived with so much of Mum's cooking poured into it, but it did. In fact, it looked like it was thriving. Granny winked at me. She adjusted her bandana, picked up her spoon and took a deep breath. I placed my hand on her shoulder and gave it a sympathetic squeeze. She reminded me of one of those kamikaze pilots from the Second World War preparing to dive to their fiery, or in her case, soupy death. Now that, my friends, was the very first chapter of Top-Secret Grandad Me, Death by Soup. Hope you enjoyed that. What I find quite useful when I'm writing stories is and coming up with story ideas is to use a thing called mind maps. Now Jay Patel uses a mind map. You might have heard of this. Some of you may have done it in school or something like that. Jay Patel uses them to solve his mysteries. They look a bit like this. You see? So they're a bit like spaghetti diagrams with lots of different things all over the place. If you're coming up with story ideas like I do, you have things like your characters and your settings and the different things that are going to happen. I find it very useful. And I use it when plotting stories like this and this, because these are mystery stories and there are lots of different characters in them and they're all up to different things, some of them very dishonest. And you need to know, it's handy to have something that you can go back and look at. So when I'm writing the books, I have a big gigantic poster on my wall with my mind map of the story and all the different characters and the settings and everything like that. So you can use them to plot out your stories and they're quite useful, I think. But you can use them, I use them in general in a wider way when coming up with the whole idea for Top-Secret Grandad Me. And I can show you this. This here is an easel. I hope you can see this. I'll try and write very, very big words and letters so that you can see it properly, okay? But when I started off writing this story, or when I came up with this idea, what I wanted to do was to write a funny mystery story. And that's how this started off. A blank piece of paper down in my study, like this, and I just wrote on it, funny mystery. There you go. So that's how it started off. It's a funny mystery story. But then you have all sorts of questions leading off from that. So, for example, where is it going to be set? Where? That's one question you always have to ask yourself. And then there's when. When is it going to be set? Is it in the modern day? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? You know, I mean, let your imagination take hold. And then there's who. Who are your characters going to be? Characters are very, very important when you're writing books. Probably the most important thing, because your story gets driven along by the characters bumping together. They all want different things and they're trying to do different things. You've got someone called a protagonist and an antagonist, different characters in the story with different functions, different jobs, and when they clash together, that is when the sparks fly, and that's where you've got your story. Just for example here, I write this other book series called Thorfinn the Nicest Viking, and this book series is about a nice Viking. Vikings are really cruel and mean and barbarous, a bit crazy. They've got huge beards, they're very smelly. And then right in the middle of them, you've got this nice character. He's very nice, he's very polite. He bakes scones, he makes tea, he helps old ladies across the road. He doesn't really have any decent Viking qualities at all. So he's a protagonist. You've got the antagonist, who are the Vikings, and the whole book series is about smashing them together and watching the sparks fly. And that book series, I'm on to my 8th book in that book series. So I've managed to get an awful lot of sparks out of these things crashing together. So yeah, your characters, very, very important. So when I started off writing this particular book series, Top-Secret Grandad Me, at first I had a different setting. My setting was America. I thought, well, all the best detective stories are set in America, aren't they? So I'll set it in America. And who? Well, I'll have some kind of cool American kid, some wisecracking detective, and I'll call him something cool like Seth Jones. Yeah, that's how I'll start off. When? Well, I'll have the present day. Why not? Present day. There you go. That's easy. And that's how I started off. But you know what happened then? I started thinking about something else. I started thinking about sidekicks. Yeah, sidekicks. Alright, that's important. If you look at all the good detectives, all the most famous detectives, they all have sidekicks. Who's the most famous detective ever? Sherlock Holmes. Who was his sidekick? Dr. Watson, exactly. So I thought, I have to have a sidekick for this guy. And then I thought, first of all, what's the best possible sidekick you could possibly have? Best? Yeah. I went through all sorts of different options and ideas, and eventually something came into my head, and it was obvious. I said, what's the greatest talent that you could have as a detective or a spy or something like that? The greatest talent you could possibly have, the greatest gift, the greatest special power, invisibility. I thought, ooh, let's have an invisible sidekick. That would be cool, wouldn't it? And then I thought, what's invisible? Oh, a ghost. A ghost. And then I thought, hang on. This is supposed to be a funny book, a comedy book. If I just have a brilliant sidekick, they're going to solve these crimes easily. I'm going to have a rubbish sidekick. So, rubbish. And then I thought, who would be the most rubbish sidekick you could possibly imagine? And I thought about it for a long, long time. And I came to one single conclusion. My granda. Or maybe any granda. Your granda? Well, I don't know your granda. Maybe your granda is really cool. A man of mystery, an ex-spy, SAS, a commando or something like that. I don't know. As for my granddad, well, if he was my sidekick solving mysteries, all he would do is go around complaining about the cost of everything. And that would be about it. That would be the sum total of the mystery. So he'd be more interested in that. So I thought it would be your most rubbish sidekick. It would be your granda. Okay. And I thought, oh, a ghost grandad. That's going to work. And then something even weirder happened. This character came into my head, and it was based on this old Indian man that I used to know. He was from Glasgow. He was a doctor, and he used to stand like, he was a very tall man. He used to stand like this. He had one of those mouths that were constantly turned down in a look of disapproval. And he would swing back and forth like that. And then he would say something. And then 5 minutes later you would go, wait a minute, what he said there, that was actually quite funny. Did he mean that to be funny? And he had what you might call a dry sense of humour. You never knew whether he was being funny or not. And he was, by the way. So that's how I got the character of Grandad in the books. He was based on this man that I knew, and he was really, really funny. So I had a ghost granddad, and suddenly everything fell into place. I wasn't going to set it in America, I was going to set it in Glasgow. Oh yes, so there was my setting. I wasn't going to call him Seth Jones, nah. I'm going to call him Jay Patel. There you go. And suddenly everything just fell into place. I'm going to put TSG here. That's Top Secret Grandad. I'm going to put a little star there. This is the whole story idea. And everything's going to link up. Present day was fine. I was going to set it in the present day. I've got a sidekick, a main character. Okay? And then all the other characters started falling into place. I had Granny, who you've met in the story, Granny. And she's always up to something in the books. So in the first book, she's into DIY in a big way. And the second one, she's into karate. So after that, there'll be lots of other things that she'll be up to in future installments. There was Granny. And then there was Mum. Jay's mum likes to think that she's a flower of nature, a bit of a hippie. But in reality, she's just this mad Glaswegian woman who likes to punch people. So that was Mum. Okay, and then I thought about Jay's dad. And then I had the idea for the whole series. The whole book series is about his dad disappearing and then Jay having to become a detective with his granddad's sidekick to try and find out what happened to his dad. And of course, that led on to all sorts of other things. For example, if there's a mystery, you've got to have a big baddie. A big baddie. I'm running out of paper here. So there is a big baddie in these books. Oh, for sure, yeah, there's a big baddie. And in actual fact, if any of you read either of these books, the clue to his identity is in, there's one clue in here and one clue in here. And no one in the country, I've gone round Scotland and I've been doing talks about Top Secret Grandad, and I've been asking kids, you tell me who you think the baddie is in these stories. Not one person has ever got it right. There's a special prize for anyone who guesses who the baddie actually is. But I don't think anyone will ever guess, but there is a big baddie. And his identity is in this story. So when you're writing your own stories at home, just remember that it can be quite useful to have a mind map to try and link everything together. My study is festooned. That's a great word, isn't it? Festooned with all these big mind maps that I use quite frequently when I'm thinking up stories. And when I'm writing stories, I can refer to them. If I'm sitting going, what's that character's name again? I just look round and he's there. He's sitting on the mind map. It's very, very useful, very important. Some writers have a Bible. Some writers, when they're creating a whole world, they have this big Bible. But I mean, that's too much. There's a lot of effort involved in flicking through and trying to find things. And so I just have a big mind map. A gigantic, sometimes it's really big. Sometimes it's really big. It's bits like this, all stuck together. But I would certainly recommend it, if you're so inclined. I'm certainly hoping to write some more books in this series. The next book in the series would be called Death on the Jobby Boat, hopefully. Or it might be called Death on the Poop Deck. It's set on a boat that goes down the River Clyde that you can go day trips on. And my granddad, he used to go on a boat exactly like it that went down the River Clyde on a day trip. And everyone called it the Jobby Boat because it was a jobby boat. It used to take all the sewage from the people in Glasgow right down the river, and it would dump it down near Arran on the Firth of Clyde. And you used to be able to go day trips on it. Old people used to go on it, and you could sit out on deck, and you could sip tea like that, eat your shortbread, and then when it came time to dump all the sewage, they would hurry everybody back inside. Quick, come on! And they would shut all the doors and the windows, and the ship would dump the sewage, and then eventually when they turned around and headed back upriver, somebody had the job of opening the door and going, Yep, you good? Okay, you can all get back out. And they would all go back and finish their tea and the shortbread. And that's a true story, by the way. We used to have these ships on the Clyde in Glasgow. You used to go down. You used to be able to go day trips on them. And I'd like to set my next Jay Patel book on that boat. I think that would be really good. Well, the last thing to say to you, and this is really, really important, the Summer Reading Challenge is a great, great thing. Don't forget to sign up. You won't regret it. The details of how to do so will follow when I've finished, okay? Remember, your library building might be closed, but there are lots and lots of Silly Squad librarians on hand to support you to get through this year's challenge. And so just get in touch with your local library and they'll sort it out for you. But it is going this year. It's going to be great. There's so many things to do. It'll just make your summer so much better. So I'd like to thank you for listening. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope to speak to you again someday. Okay? Bye bye, and have a good one. See you later.